I'm James Just, and with me is my co-host. You've been promoted there, John. You're now back to co-host.
Thank you. Yeah, does that mean I get a pay raise?
Sure,
Okay,
sure. We'll give you a pay raise. I'm happy to give you a pay raise, John. All right. So our first topic today is we've got the true cost of the flawed political thinking in California. And what's brought this up is Californians are smoking less, and so now all of those early childhood programs that they are dependent upon the taxes from smoking are now under threat of ending because its funding source is being taxed out of existence, which is actually a good thing, right? Wasn't the whole point of putting high taxes on tobacco was to get people to stop smoking? So it's been a success, but that success has come at the cost of these allegedly important early childhood programs. John, what do you think about it?
Allegedly important early childhood. Well, I think it's Kafkaesque as usual in California. Should just call the place Kafkaornia. Oh, that's what I do on my website. Anyway, it's crazy because like a gambling program, you know, they sell these scratchers and lotto tickets and all the rest of that stuff, and there's gambling is a tremendous problem. They promote it all over the place on the one hand, and then on the other hand they have all the fallout from it, and then I guess 33% of that money goes to education, but education is a big catch-all, and it mostly goes to more administrators and pensions and all the rest of that. None of it ever ends up helping the kids. So Californians are smoking less. And the reason they're smoking less is because, not that some people care about their health, but it's very hard to quit smoking. And the only way that's ever been successful is vaping. And they're making vaping almost impossible to do, especially for young people. So young people are smoking more, vaping less, but older people are smoking less because they can't afford it because of the taxes, so there's no money for the kids. So that's typical California thinking. Like they're put a wealth tax in place, so they're going to run off rich people because a lot of very rich people can work from wherever they want to. They can work from Montana. They can work from Belize. They don't have to work from California. And so, you know, the rich people are fleeing in droves when they can. And California, its infinite wisdom, basically depends upon the stock wealth from Silicon Valley. And so whenever that goes south, like it did last year, their revenue comes way down. But oh wait, they already wrote it into the budget for next year. And it's their revenue thinking is completely flawed because none of the people have ever worked in a place where they had to hit a budget or hit a bottom line. And they've never worked in a place where people are held accountable. So it's not unreasonable this is happening.
No, and for many of us, we pointed this out at the beginning. You're setting up a long-term program that you want to continue forever, but you're setting it up with a funding system that you want to end. The whole goal of your funding system was to end that funding. And so what did you think was going to happen, and did you have a plan for when this was going to happen? Okay, at some point we're going to have to transition off of this money, and how are we going to do it? And of course they never thought of that.
Well, guarantee it, man.
Yeah, they've gone crazy, and it's not just in this system.
In
right?
all,
they did the same thing with the marijuana taxes. We legalized marijuana, and then made it so expensive so that a lot of the purchasers of it are now going black market, so they're not getting the tax revenue.
Underground economy, yeah, which is probably at least 3 times what they say it is. And I think the state says that as more or the same or slightly more people are buying their weed on the black market or the underground economy, I think it's probably 5 times as many people are on the underground economy. And they had a tremendous opportunity to set it up right. You know, keep taxes low and regulations low and fees low and all the rest of that. But they got greedy. But I'll guarantee you one thing in all of these programs, that even though the benefit of the program for early childhood services might go away, the employees that are in those programs will never go away. And we will be stuck with the cost of the infrastructure to deliver the questionable services. In many cases, these services are all questionable, like the Head Start program.
Yeah, we know that the Head Start program is, the benefits you get from that are gone by the 3rd grade, which
Yeah.
makes sense, right? Because you can get a head start, but then you're going to go put into a class with that's teaching you at a level. So you can literally only be ahead for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until you're pulled back.
Yeah.
You're pulled back to the masses.
You give them a head start,
No.
and then you're going to pull them back, and then
And
you're
there,
going to hold them back.
there's questionable whether the Head Start even works, and a lot of countries basically let their kids be little wild animals until they put them into school, and by grade 3 or 4, they're way ahead of our kids. And I think we're going to talk about kids at a later time as well, not in this segment.
We'll get, and it all this comes around because, well, quite frankly, our leadership is flawed, but our leadership is always flawed, and our colleague, Mr. Fields, has something to say about that.
Ours is more flawed. Yeah, California. Yeah.
So let's hear what Richard has to say.
Are flawed. The Declaration of Independence was an 18th century libertarian manifesto, if there ever was one. Its author was Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson owned slaves. He made the Louisiana Purchase, effectively stealing land from Native Americans who had owned and occupied it for centuries by giving a small payment to France. He was a man with flaws. Ron Paul was probably the most libertarian congressman ever. He is also an advocate of restrictions on immigration, even more draconian than the ones we have now. He has flaws. And Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist, except when it comes to tweeting the location of his personal jet or giving publicity to his erstwhile competitor, Substack. And a big reason he's the wealthiest man in the world is that he is not averse to SpaceX making sweetheart deals with NASA, nor is he willing to accept government subsidies or unwilling to accept government subsidies for Tesla and his solar energy companies. Musk is a flawed human being. We all are. And we as libertarians are not in power in government. So we should be measured in our criticism of those who do wield power and influence when we have substantial areas of agreement. When Musk bought Twitter, he brought in bona fide ACLU thumping, Goldman Sachs is a vampire squid phrase coining, Matt Taibbi to write the story of how Twitter had been colluding with the administrative state to outright censor any news, think had a laptop, which could lead to Biden losing his bid for the presidency. Not to mention outright censorship and suppression of any information, true or not, that contradicted the official administration story under both Trump and Biden, or on anything to do with COVID. Censorship at Twitter under Musk is much reduced, to the horror of the censors in the White House and their sycophants in the traditional media. It continues in all the rest of corporate-controlled media. Facebook, Google-owned YouTube, Microsoft-owned LinkedIn, Bezos-owned Washington Post, the New York Times, and many more. It's possible that some of these media companies are honestly in favor of limiting their own free speech, but doubtful. It's an absolute certainty that they are all abjectly terrified of the not-so-subtle threat that if they do not cooperate with government censorship, they will face new regulations that dramatically reduce their profitability. They fear the fist in the velvet glove. Elon Musk does not. For that, we must give him credit. He's got a lot to lose. Government contracts for SpaceX and the Boring Company, loss of subsidies for Tesla, the adulation of the chattering class. For the sake of the Republic, let's hope he retains that fearlessness.
Freedom for me, but not for thee is a common thread these days, is it not, John?
It's pretty common. I have kind of forgot what a handsome devil Mr. Richard Fields was. I just saw
we can't
him
tell
there.
him you said that.
Yeah, well, he'll watch the show. He'll watch the show.
When we're talking about flawed leaders, California's labor board is kind of trying to do an end around of an upcoming referendum. They're restarting an old dead labor board so they can regulate the working conditions, pay, and whatnot of any industry they want, effectively, is what they're trying to do. They're trying to essentially put some backdoor regulations. on what they're claiming is the fast food industry. But we know how these things start. They start with fast food and they'll end up in your own bedroom, right? That's how these things start in California. So, what do we do, John, about these kind of freedoms for me and not for thee, right? You've got, California Democrats who are beholden to labor unions are now trying to force all of us essentially to work for a labor union contract even if we don't want to.
And even if we get a job that isn't labor, the idea of prevailing wage is basically, again, lefty spin on words. It means union wages. Then they'll force businesses to pay prevailing wage, even to non-union workers, and that'll force them out of business or make their, if you can have cheaper labor and you treat them well, even though they're maybe not treated quite as well as union labor, especially when it comes to retirement and benefits, then you can compete. But the state of California doesn't want those people competing, so they make them pay the same wages, and then there's no barrier, really. There's no reason for the people in the organizations to want to not be part of a union. So, and businesses go out of business. And California does this over and over again. And California, there's a Janus decision. California actually sits and waits for or looks at upcoming Supreme Court cases and basically writes laws that will get around the letter of the law of the Supreme Court, so that if the Supreme Court goes against one of their pet things, they instantly sign the law, and they've got an end around for a few years until the Supreme Court comes back to them and says, no, it says this and you're doing that and it's patently illegal, but it takes a long time to get through the courts. So, and in the Janus decision, the Supreme Court decided that people don't have to join labor unions if they don't want to in union shops. And I said that they put in a bunch of rules to protect people from the, what's the word I'm looking for, the ravenous labor unions signing people up and strong-arming them and taking money out of their pay and all the rest of that. And the state of California basically wrote a regulation stating, oh yeah, you can get out of your union and all the rest of that, but the only people that can tell you about this are the union, and the only way you can get out of it is the union. You can't even get the information from your own HR department. It has to come through the union. So California does this stuff over and over and over again, and that's one of the reasons this flawed leadership that we have is one of the reasons why Houston, Texas spends nothing on homeless compared to us, and has reduced homelessness by 40% over the last few years, whereas ours has gone up over 50% in California. It's one of the reasons why, point at Houston again, I wouldn't want to live there. It's like a swamp. It's very humid and hot there. Anybody can afford a house pretty much in Houston. Nobody can afford a house in California unless you've got, 2 teachers' retirement pay. Then you can afford a house.
Yeah. Well, the end consumer pays all costs, and when you continually add costs on, it's the poor people who can't afford, who end up not being able to afford things, because it's the end. Because anybody else, if you're a business owner, you can pass costs on. If you're a government, you pass costs on. The only people who can't are wage workers. That's it. And so wage workers pay all these costs, and of course our leaders are blind to it.
No, they don't. Well, they're not. They know what's going on. They don't care. They don't care.
Well,
their stated objective and their real objective are diametrically opposed. Like the Inflation Reduction Act. Printing $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion is going to cause inflation. They call it anyway. I could go
we
on
know
and
about
on.
that. Well,
go on and on.
This difficulty our leaders seem to have with math seems to be extending to our schools, because new data is showing an alarming decline in our basic math skills, basic skills of U.S. students, math, reading, writing, these basic skills. They're lower than they've been since, 2006, I think is what we've said.
1990s in some cases.
Yeah. And how has that, with all the money we've been spending, all these new education initiatives, these new things, all this stuff they've been trying in these last 10, 15 years, and all of a sudden now our education is worse than it's been since at least my memory.
Mm.
And so, you know, are we surprised, really?
Not at all. Not at all. And again, it's the teachers union owns the Democratic Party, flat out. The teachers union owns the Democratic Party. And any states where there's lots of unionized teachers, there is no school choice. If you ask the people at the bottom rungs of the socioeconomic ladder whether they favor school choice, I think the number for black people is like 83% favor it, and Hispanics is even higher. And yet, even though the Democratic Party supposedly serves those two demographics and they get the votes for those two demographics, they can completely ignore what they want and support the California Teachers Association and nationwide the National Education Association and all the rest of that, because they're the ones that give them money to get elected, and the other people are dragged along by the coattails. I don't know why people keep believing that the Democrats actually have poor people's interest at heart when all of their programs are inflationary, and inflation hurts poor people worse. We already talked about that than anything else. And school choice, when you have rotten schools, if you had the ability to take even part of the $22,000 a year that California spends per student, like maybe $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, and send your kid to a private school, you do it. You'd find a way to make up a little bit more. Private schools would open up left and right, and skills would improve because they hold teachers accountable and students accountable. But teachers in California public schools are not held accountable.
Yeah. Well, and there's a problem. When activists start running things start to fall apart. And it's because activists have a narrow perspective. Right? It's the fundamental problem of being
well,
activists.
activists are basically radicals.
Right.
They are not mainstream thinkers. You look at people throwing soup on priceless paintings because they think the world's going to end in 5 years if we don't stop using fossil fuels, yet no reputable climate scientist will state that that's the case. As a matter of fact, the NOA and the UN and everybody else said that the world is heating at a much slower pace than they expected it to, and the idea that all life's going to end in 5 years is nonsense. So when radicals get into power, whether they're radicals on the right or radicals on the left, you call them activists. Most activists are radicals. Bad things happen. You know, the only time in history where that didn't happen was when the radicals that throughout the British wrote the Constitution. That's really the only time.
Well, what's interesting is because he had a bunch of radicals who had different perspectives, and so they kind of created this document that kind of attempted to balance all the a bunch of different radical perspectives. The
document was designed to protect the people from themselves. And you know, since then, the radicals on both sides, and there should just be, we don't need a duopoly, we need lots of sides. We need to be, what is it, like, what is that thing that's got like 32 sides or something? That, we need lots and lots of political parties. And
kaleidoscope of politics.
Yeah, and they need to get together and form coalitions, because then they actually learn how to get along like human beings.
Yeah, and that's what we've forgotten, is activists have taken control of the political system. They dehumanized everybody but themselves. And so, you know, now you're just an animal, a piece of cattle to be kind of pushed around and manipulated. You know, and we've talked about the failure of education and the failure of leadership. We've got another story here about a professor who failed a student for using the term biological women. Now has to take a free speech class.
I think that's delightful. A woman, and it's a female professor. Can I call her a woman? Yeah. I think the new term that we're going to have to use with everybody is yo.
Yeah.
Like, hey, yo.
Dude.
Yo.
You know, hey, we're from California. We call everybody dude, right?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Everybody's just going to be dude.
She said that the paper was okay and would have passed, but because she used the term female student, I believe, it was a female student, right? Used the term biological woman, she failed her. The institution she worked for, and I forget which one, decided that she needed to take a remedial class in free speech, and I think that's wonderful. I think, you know, you know, you might hate what somebody else says, but you know, some of our founders said that. I might hate what you have to say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. And people forget that.
No,
Because,
and-
you're
yeah.
not always going to be in power, folks.
Yeah, and you don't need free speech for things you agree with.
Mm.
That's not, free speech is useless if everybody, oh, only the people who agree with me can talk freely. Well, only things that, you're not getting anywhere. You're not going to learn
And
anything.
I hate to talk trash about millennials, but millennials, they did a survey recently on, is that it? I forgot what
No,
our
I don't
topics
think
are.
it's in here.
They did a survey, and millennials believe that it should be a crime to call somebody by the wrong pronoun, by a slight majority. So it should be a crime to call somebody, ma'am, when they identify as sir, I guess, or excuse me, young lady, when you identify as a gentleman, or all the rest of that.
Yeah, but these are the same people who don't want to prosecute crimes of theft.
Hmm.
Shoplifting it's not a serious crime. But accidentally misgendering somebody, you need to be punished and go to jail. We live in a bizarre world. But we got 7-8 minutes left, so I want to get to this one. And talking about bizarro world, you know how a few years ago it was punch a Nazi, and that's okay because punching a Nazi in the face is fine. Well, now this Antifa person, and it's happened in the UK, but a person in an Antifa soldier shirt, right? He made a Facebook post that now she thinks feminists should be punched in the face. We've gone from punching Nazis to punching feminists.
This is a very interesting person. This person started out as a man, I think Alan, and went to prison, I think, for torturing some people and kidnapping some people, and while in prison killed another prisoner. So she now wants to be called, was in prison for 31 years, and the government in the UK spent $10,000, maybe more, for some sex change program for, I don't know whether that was just hormonal treatment or whether she had surgeries and all the rest of that, since healthcare is actually less expensive in the UK, although worse, so there might have been some surgery involved. So she decided that people who are, she calls them radical feminists because they insist upon calling biological women women, and people who aren't born as women, not women. And so she thinks they should be punched in the face. But she, I really don't know if I want to take my direction from someone who kidnapped and tortured people and then killed a fellow prisoner and spent 31 years in prison.
Well, I just want to point out that the roots of Antifa, if people want to take the roots of Antifa as anti-fascist, but let's remember what Antifa actually was. It was a Stalin front group to politically destabilize Germany. That's what the point is. So at best, Antifa is communist. At best, they're communists. At worst, they're Stalinists.
Well, here they're just typically Antifa is weedy young men who put on masks to do things and beat up old ladies and retired people.
Yeah, it's an excuse for people who want to be violent, hooligans who want to be violent. Now they get to try to pretend that they're the moral group of it.
Yeah, but if one-on-one,
well, I want to end the show. We got 5 minutes
positive
left.
note?
So I want to end the show on something positive.
Cool. All right.
So how do we define happiness? We've got a constitutional right here in the United States to to pursue happiness.
Pursue happiness.
There are a few states that actually somehow have you got the rights to obtain happiness.
Yeah.
To obtain happiness, there's a handful of states. But how do you do that if you can't define happiness? So how do we define happiness? I mean, I can define me. I have a meaningful life. I have people who care about me. I may not be the richest person on the planet, but I have a roof over my head. I have food in my stomach, and so I'm happy, right? So for me, that's happiness. So how do you define happiness?
Well, I define it as running over the lower classes in my Hummer that's being powered by whale oil. I'm kidding. No, I'm happiest. I think happiness was defined by most of our founders as being of good character, moral, working for, having good family relations, having the freedom to practice religion you wanted, being involved in good works and all the rest of that. And even though these people were successful, though capitalists, they defined happiness by having a good life. And I'm at my happiest when I'm writing a book, playing with my dog, seeing that my daughter is still healthy, walking by the river, and so everybody defines happiness in a different way. But you know, very few people go to their grave and think about the fact that they're leaving, you know, I mean, maybe they're happy because they're leaving $1 billion to their kids, but most people who build great wealth don't build it. It's just a way of keeping score of the success. It's not the end means.
No,
Yeah.
well, there are some people who I think the drive, the accumulation makes them happy, right? They're the type A, they're the traditional type A personality.
Yeah.
They're not happy if they're sitting still.
Oh, yeah.
They literally can't sit still.
They're human doings.
And so they're going to
Yeah,
go off
yeah,
and they're going to
yeah.
continue to do things.
You
And-
gotta keep score somehow.
Yeah.
And money's an easy way to keep score.
It's an easy way to keep score. And there's others who, you know, if you're someone like me who's kind of more naturally a hippie, you're not going to, you know, the financial rewards, the materialistic rewards, those aren't the things that are going to motivate me, are going to make me happy. It's the softer things. And there's people who kind of live somewhere in between that,
Well,
whose drive is
most of us probably live
it's
somewhere
different.
in between.
There's
Yeah.
drives are different, right?
Yeah.
You need some work, you know.
You have to, and most people, even if they're after wealth, they want to feel as if they've made a difference in life and that they left some kind of legacy. And, you know, people, one of the biggest driving forces of people of all ilks is what people think of them after they're dead.
Yeah, for my suggestion for anybody, if you want to have a happy life, you want to strive to be the best you can be. And the thing is, you get to define that. You get to define the best you. No one else gets to define that for you. The
No.
world can take a hike. You know, you get to define who the best you is.
Yeah, and
And
the cool thing is you can change your mind too.
Was that? Sorry.
You can change your mind too.
Yeah,
You know, you can wake up one morning and say, you know, I don't want to be the best lawyer in the world. I want to run the best horse ranch or whatever.
You know,
It's perfectly fine.
Evolving as a human being
Yeah.
is perfectly fine.
Good thing.
We are evolutionary creatures, right? You know, we started at the world as a clump of cells, and we eventually evolved into this stage of human evolution. We're not done. Human evolution, the Earth evolution, it's not done.
Yep.
You know, and our impact on the world, we talk about climate change, our impact on the world is actually natural. We don't have to like it. It may be stupid, but it is natural. All human activity is a natural part of
Yeah.
the Earth environment. And I hear the end of our show coming. John, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me on
for
board.
watching
Yeah.
us, and I want to thank the crew in there for their exceptional job. I can speak. I can speak
I want
tonight.
to
I really can.
thank them too, because I don't think they got a raise. Yeah.
No, you know what? I don't think with all the inflation, you know, our crew deserves a raise. I
Yeah.
think they do deserve a raise. You have to buy them some donuts or something one of these days, John. You know, we got it. It is what it is. And thank you, Richard, for helping out and giving his perspectives from the field. We appreciate all the efforts from everybody. And please remember to love everybody and good night. I almost forgot my ending there.